Hello and welcome back to the Nectar podcast. I'm your host, Max Cherney, Chief Operating Officer at Nectar. Today, I'm joined on the pod by Nectar's Customer Success Specialist, Toma, who many of you really know as the voice of all things Nectar. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring Aaron on the pod. More than any other person at Nectar, Aaron has worked with commercial beekeepers of all stripes to support them as they transition to digital beekeeping. From helping beekeepers train their workers and troubleshoot problems to making sure they get the most out of their data, Aaron understands the product inside and out and supports beekeepers in a way that, really, nobody else can. He also has mountains of stories from working with beekeepers that, I think, can be really helpful for others at different points in their journey. With that in mind, we wanted Aaron to help us understand some of the ways beekeepers are using Nectar going into split season. Splitting hives can be complicated, with a huge variety of outcomes depending on timing, worker knowledge, and technique. Nectar can help reduce some of that uncertainty by exposing the ways that these forces impact outcomes. Ahead of spring pollination, we also wanted Aaron to help us understand how beekeepers took advantage of the Nectar pollination tool this past almond season and help those that are just getting comfortable with it identify some of its least known aspects. I'm super excited to share this episode with you, and we hope it's very practical and helpful. Without further ado, Aaron Toma, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me.
We wanted to have you on the pod because you're inherently plugged into what's going on around the field from all corners of the continent where nectar beekeepers are at different stages of the season. So we thought we'd bring you onto this show here to get an idea of what nectar beekeepers are up to and what features they're most depending on in this moment.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on the podcast and share some of the things that we've been working with beekeepers on and the things that they're doing. And hopefully our conversation can help out some beekeepers or at least get them excited to try some new things.
So not all of our clients know this about you, but you're actually a beekeeper yourself. And most beekeeping podcasts tend to start off with how your bees looking. So Aaron, how are your bees looking before we get into it?
They look all right. I had not the best winter survival, but more than 50% made it. And the ones that did make it are looking really good. So um I was a bit pessimistic going into spring with the crazy winter we had here. It got so cold so many times. But yeah, I'm excited to get the spring going and make some splits and have a great season.
Speaking of splits, I think that's a good transition into one of the seasonal elements right now. Across North America, one of the main beekeeping activities right now is splitting of new hives, especially given that we've come through a winter where a lot of beekeepers had a tough winter. They're going into this part of the year with an objective to get their hive numbers up. So I know that a lot of clients are tracking their splitting with our software. So what can you tell us about what they're tracking and why they're doing it?
Yeah. So with splits being such a major part of the majority of commercial operations, especially at this time of year, we do have a lot of our clients tracking splits for different reasons and in a few different ways. But at the end of the day, most of them are looking for the same thing and generally tracking it in the same way. Um, so yeah, the main thing that beekeepers are tracking in terms of splits is they want to know how many splits they're making, and they want to know this obviously on an operational level, but they also often will want to know this by a region, by yard, um, per hive. A lot of our beekeepers are actually also interested in learning per queen type. So for each queen line in their operation, on average, how many splits are they able to make? And how successful are those splits? And what did those splits go on to do? And what revenue do they generate? And that type of thing. So um, beekeepers are tracking the number of splits that they made, like I said, at the hive level, or at the yard level, or at the regional level, or all of the above. That's the great thing about Nectar is when you track it at one of those lower level parameters, you're able to get it on all of them too. So if you're tracking obviously per yard how many splits you're making with the Nectar program, you can very easily extrapolate that number per region and per the whole operation as well. Um, so that's what they're tracking, I guess. In terms of how they're tracking it, there's a few different ways depending on what level you're tracking it at. For those who are tracking it at the hive level, our clients who have been most successful with it are the ones who are actually just tracking the number of frames of brood that they've pulled from colonies. Since a lot of the splits or nukes that are made, the frames don't necessarily just come from one hive into one nuke. Sometimes they're combining frames from multiple hives. So at the hive level, the best way to see the productivity of your hives is to track how many frames of brood you've pulled from them. Um, at the yard level, most beekeepers are using a numerical slider where they can just enter the number of splits or nukes that they create at a given time in the yard. Um, so those are the two main ways that beekeepers are tracking these things. And they're looking for a few different outcomes. Obviously, not just how many splits they've made, but they also want to, as time passes, see how many of those splits were successful. You know, how many of them actually got queens laying and were able to grow. How long are these splits living? You know, do they make it to a big revenue event? Are they able to produce honey? And also, you know, the different levels of honey production or pollination events these splits go to later down the line. All of that information can help the beekeeper make decisions on how many they need to make, and also forecasting the level of hives and the level of nukes and splits that they'll have going forward.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of beekeepers really view this as the beginning of their season, because the calendar season, especially where it follows such a strange calendar because of interruption of winter with almond pollination. A lot of our clients really view the 12 months as starting at splits and ending at almond pollination. So getting a good reporting system in place really starts here. So in some respects, if we're starting splits now, that means we're actually ending the kind of 12-month life of a hive coming into this process. So, what can you tell me about what beekeepers are actually doing in terms of reporting on last year's splits? What are some of the things they've learned? What are some examples of reports that they've made?
Yeah. So one of the things that beekeepers want to learn, and they have learned from tracking their splits in Nectar, is what's the most successful method or timing of their splits. So there's several different methods. You know, you can do a split. You could put it into a nuke box. You could just split the hive into two boxes. You could put in a queen excluder and then put the another box on top. So the workers come up, and then you just split it off since the queen's down low. A lot of our beekeepers do a combination of these methods, or one season they'll try one thing, next season they'll try the other thing. And having all that data in Nectar at their fingertips, they're able to build reports or request reports from us that will tell them how successful each method or of split has been. And the same thing goes for timing, right? So if you have 10,000 plus hives, you might be making splits from one yard today, but you don't get to the last yard for another couple of weeks, right? So that can make a big difference in terms of the success rate and how strong the split can become. So tracking those things in Nectar, you're able to very easily see, you know, which method and timing is working best in your operation or in different locations, that type of thing. Another thing that's pretty interesting too that we've seen some of our clients do is, um, you know, are their employees making the splits correctly? And if so, if their employees are each logging the splits that they make, you're able to see in Nectar the percentage of those nukes or splits that actually become full hive or actually get the queen laying. So um, it's a good way to see which ones of your workers are successful in their beekeeping practices, which ones are following instructions. And um, not to say that if you find a beekeeper that's not as successful as others, that's a terrible thing. It's actually a great thing. It gives you the chance to educate them and train them and have better workers in your operation. And these are things that beekeepers without detailed tracking are never going to really know.
Super interesting. So, speaking of workers, tracking splits requires training and kind of implementing new processes. What recommendations or thoughts would you share with a manager who's maybe rolling out split tracking and split reporting for the first time, both in terms of how to actually record, but also, why? Why should you as a worker record this, and really anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. So luckily, the tracking of splits, like I mentioned earlier, is pretty simple. It's usually just entering the number of frames of brood that you've pulled off a hive, or enter the number of splits that you've made in a yard. Those are the two main things that our clients do, and it's fairly simple for the workers to do that. I mean, I would suggest that you have a meeting with your workers, you explain this stuff to them, and you just explain the process. Have them ask questions, and they should be able to figure it out with a quick demo from you. Of course, I'm always available to help train workers on that type of stuff as well. And if you're not sure which way you want to track the splits, that's where I can help you out as well. We can figure out what you're looking for and set up a plan of what data you need and how you can collect it with Nectar.
Before we move on to other key activities happening around North America, did we miss anything as it pertains to splits that a commercial beekeeper should know to get the most out of their kind of annual tracking of these new colonies?
Yeah, you asked earlier about what data can you use from previous seasons to help with your split making now. And some of the things that I've seen that is really useful that I think is when they combine grading kind of into this process. So let's say you're a commercial beekeeper and you're having your guys grade your hives for frames of bees, and you know that last year you at this time of year, on average, you had 9 frames of bees from the hives that you were splitting with, and you were able to make, let's say, 5,000 splits. Well, now this year, if you can, your guys are tracking that grading again in Nectar, and they see that actually we're up to 12 frames of bees on average for the hives we're going to split. Well, now I can kind of forecast a bit better and know that, well, we're going to probably at least make 5,000 nukes, likely, 6 or 7,000 nukes from this. So that's another thing that the data in Nectar really helps with is being able to forecast and plan your year ahead based on previous years. Um, so that's just kind of one example I thought I'd mention, and I know it's helped out some beekeepers.
I know that some beekeepers have pretty good systems in place for forecasting things like nuke production. What are some of the advantages and benefits they're seeing to developing those forecasting methods?
Some of the best outcomes of that are pretty simple. Just being able to know how many hives you'll be able to commit to almonds or to summer pollination. How much honey production are you going to be able to make this year based on the forecasting you can do with the data? Those things are super helpful for a commercial beekeeper uh, to know. A lot of planning will go into these things. Even if you realize you're going to be making 20% more honey this year, there's a lot of planning, work, equipment, stuff that needs to be sorted out to do that. So knowing that is very valuable for a commercial beekeeper. One of the things that we've noticed is that the most successful beekeepers that we've seen are the ones who are the most organized. And to be really organized, you have to know what's going on in your operation, and you have to have at least some level of data in front of you to make decisions with.
Absolutely. I'll add that Nectar is increasingly moving towards developing our own kind of forecasting systems. So, for beekeepers out there that want to share feedback on how they're working with forecasting, what the benefits are, what areas they need to forecast, definitely get in touch, because that's something that increasingly will be rolling out and supporting you, kind of getting a head start on making those kind of resource allocation decisions.
Definitely. I'm excited to see what we can do in terms of forecasting with the data that we have available from all of our great clients. They're going to be able to forecast some cool things, I think, relatively soon.
Changing direction here, another key event that we're moving towards back into pollination. So, coming out of almonds, a number of our clients are headed up to the Pacific Northwest to pollinate tree fruit. And not long after that, clients further north and further east will get into East Coast pollination and eventually hybrid seed canola up in Alberta. And so I'm wondering, coming out of almonds, what type of learnings you have as the customer success specialist at Nectar, in terms of kind of what beekeepers benefited most from in terms of leveraging Nectar's pollination feature.
Yeah, so the pollination feature in almond was super helpful for a lot of our clients, to help get their workers to the right spot with the right number of hives, and then to be able to report back on it right away. So there are some features in the pollination feature that are a bit unknown and less used than others. And from my experience, when beekeepers find these features, it makes their life a whole lot easier. So a few of the things I'd like to just talk about are some of the features that people may not know about within pollination that can actually be extremely valuable to use. Um, since we know pollination is such a crazy time with multiple things going on, and often you're out of state or away from the shop. Things need to be working, and you have to be efficient. So we do have some great tools, to help with your contracts, help with your mapping, and help your guys get to the right spot and report on it. So the first one I wanted to mention was our unloaded and emptied feature. So our unloaded empty feature is a way for you to change the pollination drop status from inactive without scanning the hives in. Um, we obviously want all our beekeepers to scan the hives in at the moment they're dropped off, but we realize it's not always possible, especially sometimes when you're dropping hives off in the middle of the night in the dark and you got to move. So we have the unloaded emptied feature. It's a button that you can use. It's on every yard page. And it will just change the status of the drop. It will change the color of the drop as well on the map. And this is just a visual indicator to the workers and to the managers that the drop actually is fulfilled. Even though we haven't scanned it yet, it's fulfilled and it's good to go. So if you're there next week or the next morning, you can scan the hives in when you have time. But that feature is super helpful to those who need it, and I think it's worth mentioning.
And we'll leave that feature, its help center page, in the show notes. Beyond unloaded and emptied, what other learnings do you have from working with Nectar clients through almond pollination that might apply to upcoming pollination events? Are there key features that maybe are slightly under leveraged, or are there some examples possibly of clients that have best leveraged the Nectar platform in pollination?
Yeah, one other feature that I feel can be leveraged to really help make things go smoothly is the renewal function in the manager's portal. So now that we're coming up to the time where we've had quite a few clients in Nectar going to their second, third, or fourth pollination event while using Nectar, they're starting to go back to the same places, same orchards, and they need a way to manage that. So in Nectar, we have a renewal button where you can renew a previous year's contract, and you have the option to renew the contract information, like the name and the contact info, the pricing, and that type of stuff. And you also have the option to renew it with that and the mapping information. So whether the mapping and the locations of the contract have changed or not, you're able to renew the contract in either of those ways, to keep things organized and make sure everything's up to date. Your old contract from the previous years, they'll be archived and you'll still have access to view them if you need. So it's nice to start building a database of every drop and orchard that you've pollinated over the years. You can do that in Nectar, and renewing it year to year helps keep things up to date. And like I said, getting everyone to the right spot. So that would be one thing I would mention. The other thing that's been really helpful to some people who they actually go to the orchards and walk them, sometimes with the grower or the agronomist, or they go there by themselves to just flag the drops to make it easier for their guys. And that's the ability to create drops in person with the app. So if you are at the spot where you want the hives to be placed later on by your guys, you can pull out the Nectar app, find the contract, and just hit a button that says create drop here. It'll place a drop right where you're standing, and you're able to enter the number of hives required. So if you're going to be going to these drops anyways, and you don't want to sit at your computer and enter the mapping information, I recommend just doing it that way. You'll have really accurate drop locations, and you won't really be doing anything extra. It's just a couple of clicks on your phone.
Hmm. And sort of looking backwards so that we can look ahead, I think it's always useful to make a connection to the potential reporting benefits of working with Nectar and, committing to this data entry. So now that we kind of come out of the 2024 season and really move into 2025, what type of reporting have you seen that's been most useful from pollination specifically in previous seasons that might inform potential outcomes beyond day-to-day logistics of working with the pollination feature?
Yeah. So definitely the most impactful reporting we've seen is beekeepers looking at location mortality, location survivorship, and location strength. So when you're using the pollination feature, every drop is its own drop tied to a orchard, tied to a contract. So we have information on everywhere the bees have went. And obviously with Nectar, you scan the dead hives. A lot of our clients are also grading these hives. So we're able to see which locations are affecting your bees, whether that be positively or negatively. Those are some of the really valuable reporting that our clients have done through pollination. Now, tying this back to what we spoke about earlier in terms of splits, that's another thing. A lot of our beekeepers are doing splits right after almonds, sometimes even still in the orchards. So having that location data tied together with how many splits each spot is making, there's a lot you can do there to learn about where you're going to be best off to place your bees, where you might want to ask for more money or where you might not want to go. There's a long list of actions you can take with just those few data points from Nectar. And one thing that we haven't seen too much of yet, because the feature just came out a few days ago, is actually the pollination data set that we've put into Insights. So in Insights now, you can set up different graphs, charts, lists based around your pollination data, whether that be the contract, the drop, the financial information tied to the contract. All that stuff is in there. So if you want to play around with your survivorship versus your revenue, you can do that in the Insights portal, and we're also happy to help people set that up if they need. So, like I said, that feature just came out a few days ago, so I'm excited to see how our clients use it and the things that they're looking for from their pollination data set.
Not only did we include the pollination data set in the Insights feature, but we also just released an Insights gallery, which basically has ready made reports. Some of those are specifically pollination focused. So if you're in the Insights page and in the top right corner, you can create a new Insights report from a gallery. So you can kind of leverage some of the learnings of your peers and the great reports that we've built for you or your peers, which now are made available for you with your data set as a Nectar user.
Yeah, it's super exciting to see the gallery and just to be able to help our beekeepers having to do less setup of these things. They'll just be able to pull a graph or a chart with the parameters all set up to go for what they're looking for, and it will just merge with their data and show them what they need.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, it's been a pleasure as always. Appreciate having you on the show today, and I look forward to having you back on in the near future.
Thanks, me as well. And yeah, it was great to be here.
Take care. Thanks so much for listening to the Nectar podcast. I hope you find this episode helpful and actionable, and that you'll get in touch if you have any specific questions about how to implement any of the techniques we discussed. In other news, there are a few updates going live on the Nectar platform this week that I want to mention. The first is the launch of Cycles, which is a way for managers to bulk assign yard activities to be completed within a given period of time, using a start and end date. Need to ensure that the splits are completed within the next 3 weeks, or that honey supers get added to all yards within a 2-week span in June? Now you can easily specify when activities should occur and monitor their completion in real time. The other update was mentioned during the episode, and that's the launch of an Insights Gallery with ready-made reports that beekeepers can easily add to their own dashboard. Simply select the report from a list of options, and boom, your operations data will populate the report for your view in moments. You can find details about these updates and everything else we discussed in the show notes. Thanks so much for your time and happy beekeeping.